Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Deathsmiles 2, Makai no Merry Christmas. Another legendary cave shoot 'em up ported to modern consoles. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Cave, Deathsmiles 2 originally released to arcades in 2009. In 2010, it would see an enhanced port to the Xbox 360, and now fast forward to December of 2021, and courtesy of City Connection and their Deathsmiles 1 and 2 release, it's available on the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we're looking at today. So this is a title that did release 2 weeks earlier in the Japanese region. So if you're outside of that region, then you can either import this one or you can just wait a couple weeks and be able to pick it up at a slightly lower price point. But one thing to go and note, the original Deathsmiles release never received an English localized version, whereas this version, even on the Japanese eShop, is fully localized. So something to note there. Right off the bat, I can tell you that this release is well worth it. Having both the enhanced versions of Deathsmiles 1 and Deathsmiles 2 on one collection for a modern console of your choice is truly a bargain in my mind. With that said, let's have a look at what this release has to offer. So when you fire up the release, first thing you'll see is this select mode, where we can choose between firing up the original Deathsmiles or Deathsmiles 2, which is the title we're looking at today. Starting that up, we fire up the 360 emulation, and right off the bat you'll see a difference from this and the version that's available for the 360 internationally. And that's the fact that the dialogue is actually translated. The international release that Cave did for the original Deathsmiles 2 on the 360 was not translated, so already that's a huge plus for this particular release. Although, depending on how much you care about a story and a shoot 'em up, that may or may not be that big of a deal to you. Starting the title, we're taken to this nice little screen with these polygonal books. That's one thing to note, is this was one of Cave's earlier attempts at doing a shoot 'em up using polygons rather than pre-rendered sprites. So this title does have three various modes in there. There's the Deathsmiles 2X mode and the Arrange mode, which were specific to the 360 release, and then the arcade mode. One thing to note, there are some version differences as far as, the arcade version is a 4:3 aspect ratio, whereas the Arrange and the Deathsmiles 2X are 16:9 HD aspect ratio. Today we'll be showing off the game in the Deathsmiles 2X mode, as this is definitely the enhanced and, in my opinion, the best mode that this game has to offer. Once you start it, we're taken to this particular select screen where we can change some game options. You can play online in a score attack if you want to challenge other people's scores, and then of course, starting the game, we're taken to the character select. So real quick, I'm going to bring up a little image of the arcade character select, just so you can kind of get an idea of A, the difference in aspect ratio, and B, the fact that this version, or the arcade version, had a couple less characters than the Deathsmiles 2X. Basically, we're missing two of the characters that were from the original game. In the 2X mode, they're added back in. So back at the 2X mode, so the four characters from the original title are once again represented here: Windia, Casper, Follette, and Rosa. But this version also, or rather Deathsmiles 2, adds two new characters, Rei and Supe. So today we're going to show the game in two-player mode using the new characters Supe and Rei. Once you select your character, we're taken to this field map. So the first stage is fixed. This is one thing that is different from the original Deathsmiles, where you could play like two sets of stages where you could completely choose your path. There is some of that in this, but not the very first stage. One thing that the 2X version adds over the arcade version is the ability to select your rank, similar to the original Deathsmiles. So this is basically your difficulty. Level 1's it would be your easiest version, whereas level 3 is your hardest. In the arcade version, the rank is set by stage, so the more stages you've played, the harder the game would get. Chapter 1, On This Holy Night. Once again, really appropriate for the season release where we have this Christmas Eve setting. Story-wise, the evil character Satan Claus has killed killed the angels' benefactors and stolen these wishing notes, which are basically like Dragon Ball-like items where you collect them together and you can have your wish granted. So as far as our character abilities, once again, this is very similar to the original Deathsmiles, where we have the ability to shoot, but the unique part is left or right. You have two ways to fire, however. There's the rapid shot, which we'll go ahead and use the controls on the Nintendo Switch controller. Your triggers will be on your rapid shot, either right or left. But if you use the A or the B button and hold them down, you'll get focus fire, which slows your movement. It increases the visibility of your hitbox, which is a heart on the various characters, and well, in some ways also deals some additional damage. In addition to that, depending on if you use your rapid shot or if you use your focus shot, you'll get different kinds of scoring items from the enemies, and that we'll get to in just a moment. In addition to the various focus and rapid shots both directions, we also have the ability to bomb. And one thing to note, in a two-player game, the bombs are shared. In addition to like that, we have one last attack mode, and that is the lock-on. So that is something that does change between the arcade version and the 2X as well. So depending on which character you play, the lock-on will behave differently. Either it will extend out from your character, or it will extend out from your familiar. Each of the 6 characters does have a familiar that helps enhance their shots, and for some of them, such as Follette, can actually add quite a bit of damage, or in the case of they add a lot of bullets to the screen, but not necessarily a lot of damage. So here we're seeing a little bit of the story of what's going on there. We'll skip to the results screen, and we're taken back to the field select. So here, we'll go ahead and show off the game with field C and D, as those are a couple stages that I think are interesting for showing off the gameplay itself. Demons from the Depth is Chapter 2 here. Well, this could be whatever chapter you want it to be. Is a vertical stage, which I think is really interesting for what is generally a horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up. It does give the game a good opportunity to throw enemies at you both on the left and right, thus making use of the system that the game does have. So one thing I haven't touched on is, well, I mentioned it briefly, but the scoring is admittedly one of those things that I haven't gotten the greatest grasp on. I know that the scoring items are different between whether you use your focus or your rapid, and in addition to that, you'll be collecting like 2 different values in the bottom, like left and right. You can see for the player 1 and 2 of those. So when we have 1,000 in the top value for either character, if you press your lock on, it basically acts like a power-up, well, it activates a power-up mode where you have additional damage that you can deal to the enemies. So it's really, really great to take on bosses. It also greatly increases the value of well, it doesn't increase the value per se, but it does increase the quantity of scoring items that you get throughout the course of the stage. So one thing to also note with that is there are these homing shots that are generated by like enemies that die during like these modes or from the lock-on. And in order to send those ones away, you just have to use your lock-on shot again, and it will send them flying away towards the enemy and generate quite a few scoring items as well. So basically the scoring items in this game are various valued rings. So you've got like the red rings, you've got the blue rings, and there's also like skull rings as well, which are worth the most. So the release itself did also come with, well, it doesn't come with it per se, you actually have to buy it, but there is a DLC available for this particular Deathsmiles 1 and 2 release, although on the Japanese side it's another 3,000 yen, basically the equivalent of about $30. That adds like 5 characters from another Deathsmiles adjacent property. But the characters, as far as I'm aware, can only be played in the original Deathsmiles, so I didn't feel it was that relevant to the title that we're looking at today. And that is basically Deathsmiles 2 served up for your enjoyment. So as far as minus flavors are concerned, you could argue that this one kind of fits for most bullet hells, but I feel like this title gets extremely busy with what's going on screen, so much so that the enemies and a lot of the background just is actually kind of like lost in the chaos of our shots, the enemy shots, and all the scoring items. So that's actually a little bit of a disappointment, because at least in the first stage in particular, and there's also an extra stage that's added later in the game for the Deathsmiles 2 release. There's some neat like background design and just elements going on. So that's one of those things that's a little sad that it gets lost. Another minus flavor, I would appreciate if there was like a tutorial mode or something to go help better explain the scoring in the game itself, because at this point I think I've kind of like learned what's going on, but not to the extent that I feel I would like. So as far as the plus flavor is concerned though, one thing that I feel is very true about this particular cave release is, compared to most of their other shoot 'em ups, a lot of them would be intimidating or difficult to recommend for non-shoot 'em up fans or non-bullet hell fans. Whereas Deathsmiles 2, I feel, is one that's very accessible and indeed easy enough to recommend to even those that are not familiar with shoot 'em ups, let alone bullet hells. There is a little bit of the issue there with some of the story matter, specifically with just like the age of the characters, but setting that aside, I do feel that this is one of their more accessible shoot 'em ups. And then we also have the great value that's presented in this particular release. Getting Deathsmiles 1 and 2 on one compilation on the console of your choice is definitely worth it in my mind. So, highly recommended from me. So, there you have it. Deathsmiles 2 served up for your enjoyment. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday as we fight this nice older man. I want to wish you happy holidays. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.